A published scientific study recently revealed that leaving water inside a copper container for a mere 16 hours caused pathogens like E. coli, Salmonella typhi, and Shigella flexneri to vanish completely. This isn't some ancient myth. When you combine copper and zinc, you produce an authentic electrochemical response. It is a phenomenon utilized by space agencies, certified by environmental regulators, and heavily sensationalized across online survival communities. The underlying science is undeniable. The real mystery is discovering its actual limits. And to understand that, we have to look at an invisible, microscopic battery. Submerge a piece of zinc alongside a strip of copper in a glass of water, and you have instantly created a miniature power source. There are no cords or mechanical pieces involved, merely a pair of metals and a continuous electron transfer that begins the second they make contact. As the more volatile element, zinc sheds its electrons to become zinc 2+ ions. Meanwhile, copper, which sits further down the reactivity hierarchy, takes those electrons in. This transfer isn't just a theoretical concept found in chemistry manuals. It happens inside actual water, generating roughly 1.1 volts of electrical potential between the two materials. That tiny charge is sufficient to trigger a constant discharge of metallic ions, igniting a cascade of molecular transformations in the surrounding liquid. The distinct roles are easy to follow. The zinc operates as the anode, casting off electrons and melting into the fluid as zinc ions. The copper functions as the cathode, collecting those electrons to neutralize dissolved oxygen and other oxidizing agents. The liquid itself serves as the electrolyte, transporting ions back and forth across the metallic surfaces. If the water contains any dissolved salts, minerals, or a hint of acidity, the entire process accelerates. The pH level is also crucial. A highly acidic environment will dissolve the zinc much quicker, elevating the concentration of dissolved ions, whereas a basic alkaline environment can hinder the process by forcing the zinc to build up an impenetrable coating that stops the reaction cold. This goes far beyond academic theory. That identical redox mechanism serves as the foundation for KDF media, a specialized alloy of copper and zinc utilized in commercial filtration systems. Inside those cartridges, innumerable microscopic galvanic cells operate simultaneously, discharging copper and zinc ions to create reactive oxygen variants that aggressively target microbes and neutralize chlorine. Clinical evaluations verify that this arrangement successfully eliminates bacteria and slashes chlorine concentrations. Yet its ultimate success relies heavily on the specific water composition, the duration of exposure, and the total surface area of the metal. The underlying science is solid. The resulting reaction is quantifiable, and this basic electrochemical setup dates back to the invention of the earliest batteries. However, its true capabilities and limitations are entirely dictated by the specific variables at play. It all comes down to the liquid, the metallic elements, and the environment you provide for them. Centuries prior to anyone understanding terms like redox or ionization, copper pots rested on the stone floors of early kitchens and sacred temples. Ancient civilizations across Egypt, Greece, and Rome stored their drinking water in these vessels, believing intuitively that the material possessed a unique ability to ward off sickness. This habit migrated across the globe and through the ages, becoming deeply integrated into Ayurvedic practices as Tamra Jal, the tradition of keeping water in copper overnight. These rituals originated from simple human observation rather than scientific formulas, but contemporary research has ultimately validated their reasoning. A groundbreaking clinical trial recently subjected this ancient assumption to rigorous scrutiny. Scientists loaded copper containers with groundwater intentionally contaminated with massive colonies of diarrhea-inducing microbes, including E. coli, Salmonella typhi, Salmonella paratyphi, and Shigella flexneri. After allowing the vessels to sit for 16 hours at standard room temperature, the researchers attempted to isolate any remaining traces of the disease-causing agents. The outcome was astonishing. Every single droplet pulled from the copper pots was pristine. Bacterial populations had plummeted entirely beyond the threshold of detection, even after attempts to cultivate them further, whereas the exact same contaminated water held in glass containers remained swarming with pathogens. The copper material had shed a mere 177 parts per billion of its ions into the liquid, a figure drastically below the World Health Organization's safety limit of 2 milligrams per liter. Nevertheless, that microscopic trace was powerful enough to obliterate 4 distinct pathogenic threats in under a day. The phenomenon is known as the oligodynamic effect. It defines the devastating lethality that specific metals, particularly copper, exert on microorganisms even at incredibly low doses. Copper ions breach bacterial cell membranes, fracture their DNA, and induce a level of oxidative stress that the microbes simply cannot withstand. This is no fairy tale. It is a highly consistent, quantifiable reality verified by microbiologists globally and supported by real-world field tests where copper containers actively lower diarrheal disease rates in everyday households. What these tests establish isn't that a piece of copper permanently sanitizes any water supply, but rather that under optimal circumstances, meaning a purified container, adequate time, and a realistic rate of ion emission, copper on its own can drastically diminish lethal bacteria. This fascinating intersection of ancestral habits and modern clinical proof forms the bedrock for synthetic copper-zinc alloys. The narrative of copper's antibacterial strength might have started with ancient intuition, but hard data is what secures its position in the realm of water purification science. Back in 1984, an inventor named Don Hesquit was looking for a better way to filter water when he stumbled upon something surprising. He mixed bits of copper and zinc in a filtration bed to leverage their redox properties. What emerged was a new category of filtration material called KDF, or kinetic degradation fluxion. This blend, usually 60% copper and 40% zinc by weight, was compacted into tiny, permeable pieces. As liquid washed over it, thousands of microscopic batteries activated, shedding a steady stream of ions. This wasn't just a laboratory trick. When chlorine-heavy water flowed over these layers, the material catalyzed the conversion of volatile free chlorine into safe chloride ions. Independent testing recorded a massive 40 to 60% reduction in chlorine almost immediately upon contact, a finding significant enough to secure KDF a spot in municipal and home filtration setups. The overall effectiveness relied on particle dimensions, exposed surface area, and contact duration. Yet, the data was consistent. KDF could slash chlorine in half, prolong the lifespan of downstream carbon filters, and provide an additional microbial shield. Hesquit's innovation transformed this copper-zinc dynamic from a prepper's legend into validated industrial technology, bridging the gap between antique metallic vessels and the demands of modern water sanitation. In 2008, the Environmental Protection Agency officially incorporated 275 copper-infused metals, including copper-zinc mixtures, into its formal registry for public health antimicrobial claims. This permitted producers to declare their specific metals could eliminate over 99.9% of microbes like E. coli and Staphylococcus aureus on firm surfaces in under 2 hours. However, the EPA's certification establishes a strict boundary. That designation exclusively applies to rigid, non-absorbent surfaces like doorknobs, faucets, and holding tanks. It absolutely does not apply to purifying bulk drinking water. That distinction is crucial. Surface sanitation certification is not the equivalent of a water treatment endorsement, and the EPA has never approved any copper-zinc combination as a standalone purifier. The narrative frequently gets tangled with NASA references. While NASA's life support architecture does utilize metallic ions to sanitize water, the machinery is vastly more sophisticated than throwing a strip of copper and zinc into a tank. The International Space Station employs highly engineered ionization modules that discharge exact quantities of silver and copper particles via regulated electrolysis. These closed-loop mechanisms depend on rigorous, constant monitoring, not dormant metal chunks soaking in water. Official NASA records make zero mention of KDF materials or basic copper-zinc alloy filters. What is formally validated is narrow but genuine. Copper-zinc mixtures are certified for decreasing chlorine, upgrading flavor and odor, and acting as a secondary microbial defense in filtration systems. The EPA's 2008 decision verifies germ-killing ability in distinct situations, but it does not back up the sweeping, exaggerated idea that these metals can indefinitely cleanse any water source. Regulatory agencies draw their lines with extreme precision, and those lines matter when separating documented advantages from fiction. The copper-zinc purification process functions exclusively within clear, measurable boundaries. When liquid initially hits a fresh copper-zinc filter, copper ion concentrations can surge to 0.8 milligrams per liter. Gradually, this levels out to a consistent baseline of 0.2 to 0.3 milligrams per liter, comfortably below the EPA's maximum ceiling of 1.3 and the World Health Organization's benchmark of 2 milligrams per liter. Zinc exhibits a comparable trajectory, but settles at a slightly higher plateau, generally around 1 milligram per liter, which is still well within safe drinking regulations. These figures aren't just bureaucratic red tape. They are rigid limits established to safeguard human health. Should concentrations creep past these maximums from standing water, high acidity, or neglected upkeep, the liquid is no longer deemed safe. The story gets trickier with untreated real-world water. KDF materials, for instance, display incredible microbial and chlorine knockdowns when the incoming water is relatively clear. However, introducing more than 10 milligrams per liter of organic matter, measured as chemical oxygen demand, causes the system's effectiveness to plummet sharply. Organic elements can tie up metallic ions or physically block bacteria from the metal, blunting the antimicrobial impact. That is exactly why producers specify pre-filtering or consistent backwashing routines to keep the media working properly. Every officially recognized copper-zinc unit undergoes rigorous evaluation to guarantee ion discharge remains within non-toxic boundaries. This testing isn't optional. It is mandated by strict NSF and EPA protocols before any claims can be published. Those ceilings are strict for a reason. Consuming excess copper can trigger severe stomach distress, particularly in young children. Therefore, while these mechanisms hold a legitimate, defensible position in water sanitation, their utility relies on meticulous engineering, consistent maintenance, and a profound respect for the limitations set by science and regulation. The chemistry is potent, but it is not limitless. Copper and zinc aren't magical purification devices, yet their documented capabilities are entirely genuine. EPA-backed metals successfully mitigate microbes and strip out chlorine. Traditional copper containers can obliterate E. coli and salmonella in a matter of hours. The underlying science champions strict accuracy over sensationalized myths. In water treatment, much like in life, careful nuance always outlives exaggerated hype. Let's continue asking better questions. And if you want to keep exploring the actual science behind these everyday concepts, make sure to hit that subscribe button for the next video.